Pete, I want to get your take on what Ryan observed, experienced in Gainesville, not necessarily his extracurricular activities, but his football related ones, if you want to call it that. I'm not in the business of calling for the end of a tenure, for a coach's departure from a place. I'm not doing that with Billy Napier. It just doesn't seem like it's going to get fixed. And I've used the Lou Holtz thing a couple of times in this podcast about if you don't get it going by year 3, you're probably not going to, at least not there. It just seems like hope is lost. Ryan talked about South Carolina having hope, and that it seems like hope is lost again at Florida. Florida is a weird job, and it really shouldn't be, because save for the Urban Meyer, Steve Spurrier eras, they've been occasionally good teams, never consistent program. Mullen was close. Mullen was pretty good most of the time, and still right at the end, and very good, at least one year. It's an odd program. It seems like their hope is gone, and that they probably have to hit some type of reset button, which might be an extensive one and be more than the head football coach there. It would seem they might need a complete reset, not because the people are bad, people doing bad jobs, anything like that. It just doesn't seem like they can get it going, and I'm sure it's very frustrating to Gators.
Yeah. So, Reese, I think the headline on Florida is that Billy Napier will not be back as the coach next year, and now we have to figure out the details of the whens and the whys and the replacement, right? I think that, and again, I'm not saying this like some source told me this. I just think the reality of Saturday's general impotence of Florida football has coalesced to, and the drumbeat is loud enough where Billy Napier's not going to come back. And then the now is, does it happen after they go to Mississippi State and then they have a bye week, or do they go to the end of the year? And one of the complicating factors here is that, and it really underscores a lot of why Billy Napier's tenure didn't work, is there is not an interim coach on staff that jumps out at you. Like, there's not an obvious, hey, let's go to this. If you're going to fire a coach in September, and you're going to fire a coach, before 3-4 games in, you have to have a clear linear plan to say, okay, this guy's going to be our coach and the team's going to rally around him. Let's save the season, right? And it just doesn't feel like there's a guy on Florida staff that can do that. Deep on their analyst bench, they have a gentleman named Dan Enos, who is the head coach at Central Michigan. Dan Enos has been an offensive coordinator at Alabama, Miami, Arkansas, Maryland. He's a good football coach. Is Dan Enos going to come and energize and save Florida football? No. Like, he's not. Ron Roberts is the co-defensive coordinator. He's actually been calling the plays there this year. Ron Roberts is an excellent veteran coach. He's been coaching a bunch of different levels. He is more of a cantankerous old school guy than a rally around guy. Both those guys also just came in February, or January. So they don't have these deep relationships with the players either. So it's a series of bad decisions that the Florida administration is going to have to make right now. Also, it's always hard because everyone wants to know, okay, who they're going to hire. It's always hard to predict who they're going to hire when you don't quite know who's going to make the hire. So we start with an interim president, Kent Fuchs. He was the president prior to Ben Sass. Ben Sass left in a trail of need to spend more time with my family scandal. I just saw a headline, like they spent $1.3 million in catering to entertain people last year. So he was basically running Florida like he was still in government. So that's been a mess. So Kent's back to fix it. Kent hired Scott Strickland as the athletic director. He's a supporter of Scott Strickland, the athletic director. Scott Strickland's been AD in the SEC since 2010 when he took over at Mississippi State. He's a good AD. SEC ADs rarely get a chance to hire 3 coaches, and this would be Scott's third coach if he's going to it. You can debate whether or not Dan Mullen was a good hire. He had 3 good years, 1 bad one. Even in his third season, he made the SEC title game in the COVID year, and I think his first 2 were double-digit win seasons. They trounced Michigan in a bowl game. They were pretty good. Under Dan Mullen.
You can put me down as that being a good hire.
Yeah, I would
Dan
agree.
Mullen twice hired by Mississippi State, not just Scott, but Dan Mullen's a good hire.
Yeah, he was a good hire. So Florida's got to get aligned on who is going to lead us athletically, because if they were to fire Scott Strickland, they would have to then replace him by November 1st, which is a hard thing to do. It's not impossible. We've seen some quick AD turns. UCF, Kansas come to mind, like in the past, where you can get a
Texas
dude
A&M.
in 2 weeks,
Mhm.
if you want. But all of that takes, like, that's all hard to do under an interim president. So they need to sort of decide how they're going to push forward first. And then there's the coaching piece that obviously has to unfold here on when do you fire Billy Napier, and then how do you replace him? And my last point here is I don't know if the complications of hiring a coach in 2024 have really been fully articulated, because if, let's just say, and I have a piece on ESPN.com coming out about this on Monday. Let's just say you get a Florida fan wish list, right? You start with Lane Kiffin. Let's bring Lane Kiffin in. Obviously, he has a little bit of that Maverick, Spurrier, Meyer that I think the Florida fan base would like. Other names, if you're going big game hunting here, wish list, fever dream, message board list, right? Kiffin, James Franklin, Eli Drinkwitz, Matt Campbell, Matt Rule, Mike Gundy. All right. Like, if you are Florida football is a top 5 job in the country, and we're going to go recruit the best coach, that's a reasonable high end list. I'm not saying those guys would come. I'm not saying it's inevitable, but that's a pretty good wish list there. All those guys right now are in playoff contention. Now, that's obviously somebody's going to lose somewhere in all that. I just think, especially with Lane Kiffin, right, who's going to be the speculative focus of this search. He has a playoff team. He has a playoff roster. I had a scout tell me this weekend he's never had a longer day of work than going to evaluate Ole Miss in one day, and all the reports he had to write, because they had so many. This doesn't mean they had so many first round picks. It's a little like Michigan last year. They had 18 guys invited to the combine. Now, I'm not saying Ole Miss is going to have 18, but they're going to have a teen in front of that in terms of combine invites, and they're going to have double-digit draft picks. They have a loaded roster right now. So if say you want to put a coach in place November 15th, right? If you're going to fire your coach early, you want to get going. Obviously, you got to have the portal and the signing day are now early December. In that last week of November, first week, early December period, you got to get everything together. And there's a really good chance that, I think a lot of casual fans probably don't know, the college football playoff title game is January 20th. So even say you want Georgia DC Glenn Schumann, right? And that's the guy you want. And you're going to go hire him November 15th. He may not actually come to campus to be your coach for 7 weeks. Yep. That's wild. Like, that's like there. So there's going to be an interesting dance here to you almost now, if you're a Florida fan and you want Lane Kiffin to be your coach, you got to wake up every day and root for the Rebels to lose, right? That's really the most realistic scenario. I'm not saying it's impossible for a big time school to make an early hire of a playoff contender, but it is impossibly awkward. It could happen, but boy, those are going to be some tricky timing dynamics that in this new era of college football we're going to be facing if you're going to make a hire like that.